Hey Robert, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. How are you doing, Tristan?
I'm doing well. Have you been vaccinated at all yet?
Yeah, I've had both my shots
Why are you wearing your mask then?
because I don't want people to know that I'm a baby boomer.
You don't think they'd be able to tell with your mask on?
I don't know. I suppose I could take it off. You probably could see the wrinkles and all that. I was a little worried about it.
Yeah.
I did have all my shots, including rabies shots and distemper shots that they require all baby boomers who attended SIU in the 70s to have.
Really?
You didn't know that, did you?
I did not know that
Yeah,
at all.
yeah.
So what do you want to talk about today? You are writing a new book right now.
Cough.
You are the author of Sleuthing Marooned, which I haven't read yet, but I am excited whenever it does come in to check it out. But you need some help from and ideas from students. Is that correct?
That's correct. I wrote Sleuthing Marooned about 10 years ago. And I talked with the chancellor of this SIU campus at the time, Rita Chang.
Right.
She said it wasn't about SIU currently, it was about SIU in the 70s.
Right.
And I think the general consensus at the time was that it didn't put a good face on the university because it had in it one riot, one street party with arrests, a demonic math instructor, and a tornado, these types of things. I was told that the university looked okay because this student was a radio and TV major, and SIU was one of the top 5 schools in the country for radio and TV.
Right.
The school looked fine, the students didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That's my generation, and that's why I had the mask. So this is going to be about current SIU. Now, I've written several chapters and rewritten them.
Yeah.
This is going to be a chase movie a chase novel starting in Chicago.
Might get made into a movie, you never know.
I would hope so.
Yeah, right.
But it starts in Chicago, and it winds its way through Illinois till it gets to Carbondale. Now, there are several things that happen. There are pranksters involved. And these people, some of them are older, baby boomers, and some of them are younger. There are 2 political philosophies. One is the extreme left. This is what we had in the 70s with the riots at SIU.
Right.
Then there's the extreme right. We're talking about people who invaded Washington earlier this year.
Right.
There's somebody who's overseeing this. He's bringing the right and the left together.
Okay.
Things such as a ketchup bottle, a big ketchup bottle water tower near St. Louis. It used to be near a ketchup company that's long gone. Well, the pranksters fill the ketchup water tower with ketchup. They do other little things like launching Superman, the statue in Metropolis, out over the Ohio River. When things get to Carbondale, I had all sorts of ideas on what could happen until I started talking to people in the university, and I realized that some of these ideas weren't very good.
Were they just not very good, or did they not, was it kind of like their own agenda and trying to reflect a positive light on Carbondale? Because there's a difference, if you get what I'm saying.
I think the ideas were very good.
Yeah.
But what they did not want, and I'm not going to go into any detail about what I had planned, they didn't want any violence.
Okay.
They didn't want anything that would give people ideas. Because we have a situation in this country now where there are people who will do things just because they hear about it on a webcast.
Well, there are people who do things to get it online and go viral.
Yeah.
Which is,
and part of this is a protagonist is a guy who has his own blog.
mm-hmm.
It's a video blog, and he does a blog for people who don't have a lot of money. They generally sell their vacation back to the company. And then they work their part-time job or get overtime.
Right.
They don't take a vacation. So this guy has a blog where he goes to various places that are very inexpensive to go to. He makes deals with hotels for cheap accommodations, and people like it. Well, he happened to be at one of these scenes, the Leaning Tower of Niles, when it fell over. And that was the beginning of the pranksters.
What is the Leaning Tower of Niles?
It looks like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, and it's in Niles, Illinois, a suburb of Chicago.
Okay.
And so there we go, and the thing falls over. So you have these little pranks that are happening around the state, and it makes its way to Carbondale.
Right.
I have to figure out a way to defuse all of this stuff in Carbondale, so there's no more pranks in Carbondale.
Right.
That's not an easy thing to do.
No.
Either that or just rewrite the whole thing all over again and have some other premise. But I think a chase premise is good. It'll attract people's attention.
I think it's definitely intriguing.
Yeah.
So the video blog part, is that to kind of engage a little bit more with the younger audience?
Yes.
Right.
And I had somebody who was in her 30s who recommended that.
Right.
And because I'm a baby boomer, I don't identify with younger students. It's hard to identify. Even though all the stuff that we have here in technology came up and I was basically raised with it.
Right.
But I wasn't born into it.
Yeah. Well, that traditional broadcasting radio, television is being offset by the podcast and the YouTubes and personalized broadcasting.
And podcasts to me are kind of like radio or television without the transmitter. So that I can do without any problem. But that's why I put that protagonist in there for the podcast. The other thing is another protagonist is a graduate from SIU. And they're up in Chicago and they find themselves being chased down to Southern Illinois. So we have an immediate connection with SIU. The whole purpose of writing this novel is to promote SIU, and it needs all the promotion it can get. Now, I believe in this university. I worked at my high school radio station back in the 60s, and I was a strictly mediocre student. And SIU accepted me, and I wound up in one of the best radio TV programs in the country. It was the top 5 when I was here. When I graduated, it was the top 4, and everyone congratulated me for graduating. Congratulations, Robert, we're now in the top 4. I was the worst type of mediocre student you could have. I excelled at radio and TV. I lived in Bailey Hall at Thompson Point because it was close to the radio and TV department in the comm building. If I didn't like a class I was taking, I just blew it off. One time I was on. Huh?
I've been there before.
Yeah. Have you ever been on academic probation?
I have, but that was back in the day before I dropped out initially and then decided to come back.
Well, so was I.
Yeah.
Were you ever on the dean's list? And
I was on the dean's list last semester, but I've never, what you were saying, never been on academic probation and the dean's list.
Yeah, well, that was quite an accomplishment.
That is quite an accomplishment.
And I was the night supervisor of WSIU radio when we operated it, the students did. And I was a teaching assistant.
Okay.
I taught what we called basic knobs and dials.
Basic knobs and dials. Okay.
This is a television camera. That's a monitor over there. This is a microphone, that type of stuff.
Right.
So they accepted me and they pulled some strings, to keep me in school. I'm talking about the radio and TV department. So I think SIU is an excellent place for a lot of different types of people. I dated a chemistry major. She was working on her PhD in chemistry. She was from Yugoslavia.
Good.
And here I am, C average student.
So you talk about a lot of what SIU was back in the 70s, and it's obviously very different now. What are
Yes.
your thoughts and feelings coming back and seeing it as it is this moment?
Well, when I first got back in November, I'd walk around the campus, and it was depressing because here we're in, well, it's now semesters. It was quarters when I was in college, but there's so few students, and it had to do with COVID too. But I've come back to this school several times over the last few years, and there are fewer and fewer students. You have this big university. My French translator wanted an outline, a map of this university to publish in Saluki Marooned. She said SIU is like a small city. They don't have schools like this in Europe.
Right.
Yeah. So I'm walking around going, wow. And then I walk around places on campus that are familiar to me that haven't changed.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like the buildings are all up there smiling at me going, we look the same, but what about you?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have mixed feelings. Now I go on campus to write and I walk around and I enjoy it, but it's kind of like I'm a ghost.
I've walked to work. It's a beautiful campus.
It is. I think I've been to Europe several times. Been down to Mexico numerous times because I lived on the border. I've been to various universities around the country. I think this is the most beautiful one. And unusual.
That's saying quite a bit.
And unusual.
Yeah.
This is at the halls of Ivy.
So you're really into the Southern Illinois history, which you've explained to me before, but what are just some of the fun facts historically wise about the university that you could bestow upon our listeners? Let's get started.
Fun facts are fun now.
Right.
But not back then they were fun.
Right.
The unfortunate thing is these facts are all tragic. You have the great earthquake of 1810, 1811.
Yeah.
Which destroyed the whole area. I read that there were something like 20,000 homes destroyed.
Yeah.
There was
That's from Marianas Trench, right?
No, this was the New Madrid.
Yes. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
That's the Marianas Trench is a trench in the ocean.
In the Atlantic,
Yeah.
Then there is the Great Tri-State Tornado of 1925. It was the deadliest tornado in history up until the late 70s. And I think there was one that was deadlier in India. This one killed more than 700 people.
Mm-hmm.
There was one town in Southern Illinois that was completely obliterated.
Right.
Another one 3/4 obliterated. Murfreesboro lost schools. A bunch of kids got killed. I mean, this thing was on the ground for 3.5 hours.
That trench could potentially go off again, couldn't it?
Are we talking about the
New Madrid?
New Madrid Fault?
Yeah.
Yes, it can, and there have been predictions, and there have been earthquakes here.
Right.
Small earthquakes.
I remember when I was a kid, there was a small earthquake. Yeah.
So it could go off again, yes.
Could you potentially tie that into your new novel?
I could, but do we really want an earthquake in
Right.
Carbondale?
Exactly. No, we don't.
I mean, everything's going fine, and all
Right.
of a sudden, everything gets shaken down except for the Feiner building.
I'm sorry for giving you these poor ideas again.
No,
you
it's
don't need any
it's
more
a
of those.
wonderful idea.
Yeah.
It's just, there was the Heron Massacre in the 20s. Coal miners were murdered, their throats were slit because they were not part of the Union. And a tornado in the late 50s in Murfreesboro again. The riots at SIU in 1970.
Yeah.
When I got off the train at the old train station where that caboose and where that engine is.
Yeah.
Was in the summer of 1970 before I started school. I was registering. Every single door and window along South Illinois Avenue was boarded up.
Really?
Yeah.
Just because of the riots.
Because of the riots.
My parents, my mom was a little girl at the time. My dad might have been a student here, and they talk about it very seldomly. But I remember my mom telling me that she lived over in Carterville, and her oldest brother had to check out the riots, and he came down here to check out the riots. I think he was driving a nice, Dodge Charger or something. And he ended up getting his windows smashed when he came down here to check out the riots.
Yep.
And that's really one of the only stories that my parents have told me about the riots.
Well, I missed the riots and I missed the burning down of Old Main in 1969, but I saw some things going on here.
Yeah.
We had several mini riots, if you want to call it that, street parties that got out of hand, fights in classrooms. I saw a student janitor attacked with an ashtray. This woman took the ashtray and hit him with it. I saw the football team empty out of the second floor of Schneider Tower where they were staying because somebody threw a snowball through an open window. And I was standing there and I watched blood in the snow.
Yeah.
I saw some bad things and we were aggressive. Even the so-called middle of the road student, and I think most of the students were that way. They didn't support the Vietnam War, but they were not that militant against it.
Right.
They were going to school. We were very aggressive. We were not very polite. We didn't like authority. Now I see students here, and they, yes, sir, no, sir. Oh, they're talking to me.
Yeah.
Because I kind of look at myself as an overage student in some ways. So we were not as nice, and frankly, I think the baby boomers really screwed things up for students now because the cost to go to college is extremely high. Back then, it was only a few $1,000s for the whole year.
It's a lot more affordable, that's for sure. Yeah.
It was more affordable. And the World War II generation set things up for us very nicely. They worked really hard, and we had a lot of opportunities back then that students don't have now.
Do you think there are more opportunities back then than there are now, even with the price being almost quadrupled, even more so?
I'm saying opportunities for jobs, work.
Yeah.
Even the minimum wage back then, you couldn't live on it, not very well.
Right.
I think there are opportunities, but I'm seeing the opportunities mainly in the lower wages.
Mm-hmm.
It's more difficult, I think, to climb, because what would happen in the old days is a person would start out in, say, in a company in the mailroom. Then he'd work his way up and work up higher, and maybe he goes into merchandising or something, and he becomes president of the company, 20 years. This type of people used to stay with companies their entire work careers.
Yeah.
You don't have that. You don't have the stability that we used to have.
Yeah.
And it'll be up to the next generation to create that stability somehow.
Yeah, as millennials, what I see trending as far as work obligations go, I see a lot more of them pick stuff outside of just the paycheck, more meaningful work, or a lot more nonprofits, a lot more environmental impact work, things like that nature, less corporate jobs. I would say the corporate environment's changing quite a bit just because they don't want that going in.
That's what I've read too. What happened, I think, was my father's a good example. He lost his father when he was 6.
Mm-hmm.
You had the crash of 1929. You had fathers who would go to stand in line for hours for a job. Their shoes would have holes in them. The wife would turn the lapels of their jackets around because they were getting threadbare. They didn't look very good. And out of maybe 1,000 people standing in line, they might hire 50 people. So they went through all this stuff year after year after year. Kids would go to bed hungry. My father used to stoke the furnace of his apartment complex after school.
Really?
Yeah, to earn some money. Okay, so when the Great Depression was starting to phase out in the late 30s, things started looking better. Then World War II hit. My father joined the Army before the draft.
Mhm.
And he went to officer candidate school, became an officer, and fought in World War II. He was in combat.
Mhm.
Okay, so you had these kids who grew up really fast, going through the Depression, and
Yeah.
now they're in World War II.
Right.
500,000 Americans were killed in that.
Yeah, it's called the Greatest Generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they come out, and now what's going on now? Well, there's a slight recession. So they work hard and they build things up in the 50s, and by the 60s, they're pretty comfortable.
We've had it so easy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In the Vietnam era, baby boomers.
I was talking about millennials. Millennials have had it extremely easy.
Well, yeah, but I think you also have things that are more difficult. The money coming in is not as easy.
Yeah.
I don't know, you're a millennial, you're better able to determine that. I'm not going to say, oh, this generation is lazy. I haven't seen a lot of lazy.
No, I feel like our
millennials.
biggest problem is the anxiety we get from looking at our phones too much. Like, it's really not. It's fairly minuscule when you look back on some of the other generations.
Well, our generation was, my father and the other neighbors, most of them had been in the military.
Right.
Didn't want the type of lives for us that they had to live through. So I think we were sheltered to a large degree.
Yeah.
And then TV came out. We were the TV generation. And TV is kind of fantasy, but a kid doesn't know that completely. And now we've got, this stuff.
Right.
I'm the same way. I check something. Oh,
Yeah.
I'm getting to be like a millennial.
I think everybody is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So why did you feel obligated to take it upon yourself to promote SIU? Like, why you specifically?
I wasn't thinking in terms of why me. It's something I was passionate about.
Right.
I lost a job in the late 90s, and I decided, well, I'm going to take some time off, and I went to Europe.
What kind of job was it?
I was working as the manager of a weather station.
Okay.
Now, I've had two careers, broadcasting. I was news director of two TV stations. I was an anchor, investigative reporter on radio. I was news director of a radio station. But in aviation, I'm a pilot. I was a flight instructor. I taught people how to fly. And I was working at a radio station, and we would call up the weather, the airport, to get temperatures and current conditions. And they found out that I was a pilot, so they needed weather people, so they trained me to be a weather person.
Yeah.
And I found that going into work at a weather station is far more predictable than being a flight instructor, because you have to sit at the airport waiting for students, get paid, that type of thing. So I went into weather. At one time I was working at a weather station, and then I was on the air in the morning, and I was flight instructing in the afternoon. I did that all in one day. Talk about Trump.
Yeah.
It's like trying to switch gears.
Yeah.
So anyway, I lost that job. A new company came in. I didn't get along with them. I got the axe. So I went to Europe, England and Scotland, and I thought, what's the thing I can do the best, which I like doing, and that's writing. I thought, what was one of the best times in my life? When I was a student at SIU. Well, I thought, why don't I write a novel about SIU? And that's how it came about. So I wrote the first novel, and I thought, well, I'm semi-retired now. I was living in Nashville. I had a part-time job, which I lost because of the COVID. The doctor didn't want me going to work. So I thought, okay, let's sell a lot of stuff I have. I liked it simpler when I was a student, and let's move to Carbondale. I did it almost on a whim.
Yeah.
And what I like doing best is having things simple, where I don't have all these things, RVs, a van and a Viet,
Minimalism.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because writing there are two things that have been extremely difficult for me. One was writing the first novel. It took me 8 years. The second was learning how to be a pilot.
Yeah.
No one's trained in high school or college by going to regular classes to learn how to fly.
Something you have to practice.
he had something that's totally different.
Yeah.
And so that was difficult. In writing a novel, I thought, I'm a broadcast writer. I could write a newscast. I could do this. I could do that. I could write a novel. Well, I hired somebody from the writing lab at the Fainer building. And he set me straight on my writing. I was writing like a broadcaster.
Right.
I tried to write normal. The broadcasters write in caps and dots. So you can read it off the teleprompter, or you can read it off here, because you're doing other things many times. You want to get distracted. So, semicolons, commas. I would put commas where there would be a natural pause when you're talking, comma.
Right.
Well, that's not the way it is in regular writing. So I had to learn regular conventional writing and plots, how to put together a plot, how to put together a character, how to describe things, in ways that people are interested in.
Right.
This is very difficult to do.
Right.
So that's what I had to do, and that's what I'm still doing.
What advice would you give to any good writers out there, possibly students, on how to do character development, description, plots? Any tools, tips to trade?
No.
No.
And I'll tell you why. I'm not in a position to be telling anybody how to write, other than broadcast writing.
Right.
That I'm an expert at. But this type of stuff, even though I've written one novel and it has flaws in it, like the punctuation and things like that, I would say this. If a person wants to write, regardless of their talent, they'll be able to do it. I'll give you an example of somebody in broadcasting. There's this guy I worked at a radio station. He was the news director. He's in charge of the news. He also wrote for the local newspaper.
Right.
He wrote incoherently. He was a horrible writer. And when he was on the air, he mumbled. The other guy would say, hey, what do you think of that pitch? Oh, the pitch is good. And I'm sitting there, what the hell is he? He was horrible.
Yeah.
He was not a good writer. He was not a good announcer. Yet he had a job in radio and a job at a newspaper. And I remember Dr. Kurtz, who was one of our professors from New York. He was the general manager of SIU Radio and TV. And I was complaining about some student, I was bitching about it. He says, Rickman, when you get in this industry, you're going to ask yourself sometimes, how did he get in this business? And then when he got his doctorate degree, I said, Dr. Kurtz, congratulations. Thank you, Rickman. I said, I've got this pain in my left elbow. Wondering if you can look at it. He said, Rickman, take 2 aspirins and go to hell. On my way. So I guess the only thing I could say is the usual bromide is you got to keep at it.
Right.
Keep learning this stuff one way or the other. Find a good writing instructor that you get along with. When I was a freshman at SIU, I was in a beginning writing class because that's what they thought. I rated. Anyway, the teacher saw that I had it was a TA. She saw that I could write, but I just wasn't following the rules. So she sat down with me after the classes and helped me out. And then I got advanced to the higher level of writing.
Right.
Yeah. So I can thank her for that. But really, it's a matter of doing it and then learning from other sources.
Right.
And you have to keep learning.
Yeah.
But that's nothing new.
That's almost every discipline. You have to
that's what I'm
practice it.
saying.
Yeah.
I can't really help someone write other than in broadcasting.
Let's go a different direction. Do you have any advice you mentioned going over to Europe and picking something that you were good at? Do you have any advice on helping out a student who might be pulled in a bunch of different directions, pick that thing that they are extremely good at and running with that?
Well, the way I was brought up was, Robert, I just hope your brother gets into a field that's more practical. Gee, thanks, Dad.
Right.
That was the World War II Depression era thinking, and of course there was a good reason for it, because these people had no security whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I was told by my uncle and several people, any job's a good job. You got a job, it's a good job. Well, now we're way beyond that.
Yeah.
Where there's a lot of jobs. Financially, they might not be good, but you can survive.
I would say that wouldn't be the majority thinking these days at all.
I know,
Yeah.
I know. The way I approached things was I didn't follow that.
Yeah.
I tried to do the things that I was attracted to. Now, you've got a student who's pulled in several different directions, that's understandable. It's to be, I would say, first of all, accepted because you're young. And the second thing is experiment in those directions. I think if a person experiments, you might like broadcasting. Okay, well then there's another thing you might like to put together bookshelves, build furniture.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, you might be good at baseball. And so you do all these things and eventually it will gel.
Yeah.
Or you'll continue to do all these things. Meaning that might be the right thing to do.
Yeah.
I think the anxiety, and I'm what is known as a nervous person. And I on camera.
Yeah.
On camera, I don't show it. But maybe I do. I used to anchor TV newscasts and then come apart after I got off the air, just go nuts over something went wrong. What happened on the camera? You've seen that type of stuff with anchors, when the camera goes off, they start similar to that. The nervousness that people feel now, I think is probably justified with COVID-19 because it's uncertain what's going to happen. So I think that the best thing to do would be to concentrate on what you are doing. And what I try to do is I just occasionally get nervous about some of the things happening to me. I get back into work and that helps.
So let's transition over to the incubator then. How has the incubator helped you at all? Do you like working here? What are some things that you would change?
I got some eggs that have, wait a minute, it's the wrong incubator.
Right. Not that one.
Okay. I don't know enough about the incubator to make a decision, comments about what should change or what should not.
I would appreciate your feedback on just, your thoughts.
Well, you need a haircut.
Yeah, I've gotten that from many people before.
Yeah, you hippie.
Yeah.
No, what I can say about the incubator for me is it gives me a place to go where I can sit and concentrate on what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. This morning I sat and edited some audio I recorded for Silky Maroon, chapter 5. I recorded it and I have to edit it to a certain high standard that the audiobook producers will accept. Can't hear noise, just a bunch of stuff that I really have never had to do. But I could concentrate and do it. And I've got other chores I concentrate and do. I also have got, you've given me some advice. Counseling is what I need regarding what I'm trying to do.
Right.
And so I'm in a good place for it because that's what you guys are here for. The coffee, so many different possible.
There really are. There's so many flavors. We try to explain that to people whenever they ask about us, like just how many different flavors the coffee are.
I'm trying every single one. And my doctor told me I should cut back on the coffee.
Yeah, what does he know?
I look pretty good for 25, don't I?
Yeah, I think you do. I look pretty good for
that's 6.
Yeah.
What's so funny is that I see students now and I think they're too young to be going to college, but I looked younger than you do when I was going to college.
Well, I'm 25. I feel too old to be going to college sometimes. And I'm an undergrad, but I'm also a non-traditional, what they would call a non-traditional student.
In that, what is that? You work on the side?
Meaning I worked, I went to college initially, and then it wasn't for me at that specific time in my
Yeah.
life. And I went out and worked for a while, and now I'm coming back. And that's what they would consider a non-traditional student. They didn't go the traditional route of, you're 18 and you know what you want to do, and you go to college, you get a degree and everything like that.
Well, that's the way we were. In fact, a friend of mine who was in the radio and TV department when I was here, Roger Davis, said he wished he didn't go to school at 18 because he was a mediocre student as well.
I wish I would have just gone out and worked after 18, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's because you get to a point where you say, wait a minute, this blowing off classes, what am I doing?
Yeah.
I should pay attention to what I'm doing. That's why I'm here. I started at 17. I was put in school a year early because I was smart. Of course, I disproved that very fast.
Yeah, and I think there's that thing you said about following your own path and kind of picking what you like and what you're interested in. I just didn't have that at 18. I was really just a dumb kid and just did not know what I wanted to do. And there was just a lot of pressure to go to school. Where I think if I would have done it that time, I would have ended up picking something that I would have not wanted to do for the rest of my
Well,
life.
your background is your father was a professor, wasn't he?
My father's professor in statistics. He is since retired.
Well, it would not surprise me that you were pressured into going to school.
Well, both my parents are education professionals. So
Yeah.
my mom is the registrar at the university, and my dad was a statistics professor. You can imagine how they felt when I decided I wanted to drop out after a couple of years.
Yeah, they probably felt we're failures. My father owned a camera store. He went to college for a while, but he dropped out. He wanted things practical.
My father does. He likes things extremely practical as well.
Statistics, right?
Yeah, as you can imagine.
Yeah. My father was big on math. I was horrible at it. In fact, I had to change somehow the radio and TV department changed my degree from a Bachelor of Arts to a Bachelor of Science because I couldn't get through algebra.
Because you couldn't get through algebra?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense.
No, it doesn't. We had one guy who got mad because there was a typing requirement for the College of Communications, and he left, got a job, but they didn't give him his degree because he didn't pass the typing test.
That's great.
Yeah. But in retrospect, at 17 going to SIU, I only cared about broadcasting.
Yeah.
I worked at WA and also flying. I was learning how to fly.
Yeah.
Those were the things that were important, not earth science, English. It was all the way.
Right.
So I do believe that a non-standard education is probably, for some people, a good idea. Others have decided what they want to do by the time they're 18.
Yeah.
I think it depends on the person.
It does.
Yeah.
Well, Robert,
Well, Tristan,
I have to get going.
well, I have to talk to my parole officer.
Do you?
Yeah, and my psychiatrist.
Okay.
Did you realize that all SIU grads prior to 1974 had a mandatory parole officer and a psychiatrist?
Are you serious? I can never tell.
No,
these
I'm not
things.
serious.
All right. Good talking
That
to you,
wraps it
Robert.
up. That's it,
What do you
folks.
want people to know about your new book coming up?
Well,
Where do they follow you at online?
well, let's see, the original book, Facebook, Saluki Marooned a Novel.
Okay.
And then my website, salukimarooned.com. I have a Carbondale blog on the right top. And I walk around the campus, comment about this, that, or the other thing. And so they can check me out there.
Okay. Sounds great. Well, it was good talking to you, Robert. Thanks
Good
for doing
talking to
this.
you, Tristan. Well, thank you. Get back under cover.
Yeah.